Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Blue Water Navy, The War at Sea. This is a game designed by Stuart Tong and published by Compass Games. It is a modern warfare game, hypothetical US-Soviet Union conflict, and that definitely had my interest, and that's why I got a copy of this, and it's going to get on my table here. But let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. Says at the top, NATO fights the fight it was created for, and the fate of the free world hangs in the balance. Blue Water Navy covers the war at sea, air, close ashore, and low Earth orbit from the Kola Peninsula in northern Russia to the Mediterranean Sea and west over the Atlantic Ocean to the United States and Cuba. The game models a full order of battle that could be expected in 1980s wartime, from multi-regiment Soviet Tu-22 backfire bombers to multiple US carrier groups. The game is card-driven, with each card providing points to move units or trigger special events such as KGB assassinations and Space Shuttle. There is also a reaction mechanic where most cards can be used in the other player's turn to perform a spoiling event such as raid aborts and friendly fire. The heart of the game is detection. Task forces can only be attacked once detected. By contrast, land air bases can always be attacked. The race to detect opposing task forces begins as soon as they enter potential striking range of units such as the formidable Soviet bomber formations or perhaps the Soviet submarine fleet, which, while it is considerable strength, cannot effectively detect enemy forces without help from its comrades. And you see here that is an example of the map. The counters, it says the complexity is medium, time scale is 1 turn equals 1 day, map scale each area roughly 500 square nautical miles, unit scale 10 ships, 3 submarines, 1 squadron of planes. It is for 2 players. It is medium solitaire suitability, and the average time to play is 1 to 3 hours or 8 to 16 hours for the campaign. And here are some of the cards that come with the game. Components, you get 1 30 by 45 inch map, 4 counter sheets, 4 player aid cards, 2 card decks, 1 rule book, and 6 10-sided die. So let's take a look inside and see what you get. And we get a couple of decks of cards, a Soviet deck and a NATO deck, a whole bunch of D10s. They said only 6, I believe, but it looks like there's 5 for each. We get a Compass Games catalog, our scenario book, rule book, a bunch of player aid cards, our maps, and counter sheets. So let's set up the map and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the map that comes with Blue Water Navy. It's actually 2 separate maps that you're going to join together. There are graphical cues on them that will allow you to line them up, and they line up perfectly. As you can see, it's very information dense. It's an area movement map. There are a ton of different informational boxes around the map and alongside the outsides of the map as well. You've got task force boxes for the US and Soviet fleets. You've got convoy holding boxes, destroyed boxes. Over on the Soviet side, you have Soviet stability track, Soviet spy infiltration track, and a Soviet nuclear strike capability track. There is also a space track, a technology track, the Boomer Bastion and Arctic boxes for transiting submarines over the Arctic as they move their way towards the west to deliver their target packages. Each zone has its own weather table, which is good because you have Mediterranean, East, Mid, and West. So each area is going to have different weather, as you do have around the globe, and you would expect in a game of this scope. But it definitely has that feel reminiscent of Harpoon, just with a massive graphical upgrade. Very well done map. Now we'll take a look at the counter sheets that come with the game. These are the NATO forces. You've got air forces and surface forces, and your subsurface force and some more surface forces, as well as admin counters on the right. Then you've got Soviet forces here, air and naval forces, as well as some missiles and even some ground forces. There's going to be some limited ground combat apparently. Then you've got more subsurface forces for the Soviets and more admin counters. And we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game. There are 4 separate player aid cards for each player. They are double-sided. This is your action and turn sequence card. On it gives you the different types of actions you can take, your ops track events, and then the turn sequence. On the back, you get your how to read your air and naval units, as well as your carrier ID bars, the missile types, other items on the counters, and then the countries for each of the counters. And here's your air card. This gives you how to do your cap and interception, so you know how to do your combat air patrol and intercepts. On the back is how to attack land targets, facilities, striking Soviet troops, and cruise missile attacks versus land targets and port capabilities. Then your detection, missile attacks, and damage for your task forces, all the different boxes for each of those functions. On the back, you have attacks on and by submarines. Same thing, you're going to have different boxes for the different capabilities of your subsurface and surface forces. And lastly, we have the convoys, war tracks, mines, repairing ships, and nuclear weapons boxes. On the back, you have Soviet-specific rules, spies, invasions, first strike points, and technology. And we'll take a look at a couple of the cards that are in the game. These are the Soviet cards. The ops points are in the top left. The top right number is the cost to use the card. When you want to use the event, you're going to only use it when you use op points. This is the reaction, which we've talked about before. If you're going to play a card, you can spoil it with the use of a reaction card. You have KGB Assassination. This gets removed from play. So just like in other CDGs, when you use some cards with specific or really powerful events, you'll remove that from play. And then you have the same for the US Minesweepers, and then a reaction would be Special Forces. And then the Fast Convoy, that would be an action that would be removed from play. And then the reaction would be Top Gun Moving Mud on this card. Now we'll take a look inside the rulebook. It is a 55-page rulebook. But looking at it here, it looks like the rules go to about page 42, because from 42 to 55 is some reference material. You have your glossary, military acronyms, and their definitions. Introduction to NATO and Soviet forces, combat units, and how to read your different counters. A couple more pages of that here, and some more here as well. And then you get into your cards, dice, and the game map. Then we get into the Arctic and how to transit. We were talking about on the map on the top right, the Soviet Boomer Bastion and the Arctic, how those transit boxes work. First strike evasion, hydrophone barriers, land areas, airfields, determining victory, and then you get into your game setup finally on page 13. So the rules actually for the game start on page 13. This is all supporting material before and after, a little bit less than the 55 pages we initially saw, still quite a bit to grok. And you have your detailed turn sequence, then determining weather, task forces, task force movement, special units and concepts, capture mines, port mining, missile ammunition tracking, cruise missile ammunitions, we get into capital ships, and then explanation of how to damage and repair them, operations points, which are done off the cards, just like any CDG, and how to use those, surface units, miscellaneous actions. And then you get into combat on page 23. A lot of the charts that are out here in the rulebook that are in the player aid cards that you can use during the game. You see them all here in the rulebook. Some more here. It looks like the way it's set up that you can learn from the rulebook, and then the player aids will be what you will reference primarily in the game. Then we get into amphibious landings and NATO troop delivery, capturing facilities, war and invasion tracks, and then the different nations in the game. Soviet boomers, NATO boomers, Soviet spies, pre-game technical theft, nuclear weapons at sea, Soviet stability, NATO losses option, markers, and then more charts here on the next couple pages. And then your optional rules on page 40. There's a couple pages of those. And then we start with the surface ship unit reference here on page 42. And then your Orbats, and then your example of play on page 47. Nice graphical examples of play for a few pages, quite a few pages actually. And then we get to the designer's notes on page 54 and the credits on page 55, and that's it for the rulebook. And we'll take a look at the scenario book for the game. There are 6 different scenarios, 5 individual, and then the 6 is a campaign game. The Boomer Bastion is the first one in 1983, Ace Mobile and First Convoy in 83. Then you have Kirovs and Carriers in 1983. Looks like they're all 1983. And then we have the Kola Peninsula attack in 1983, and then Baltic Bust Up also in 1983. So they are all in 1983. Then you have the campaign game scenario on page 15, and that gives you the order of battle for the campaign game, which is going to be everything that you got, which is a ton in this game. And the NATO and Soviet forces, and that is it for the scenario book. And that is a look at everything you get inside of Blue Water Navy, The War at Sea, a game designed by Stuart Tong and published by Compass Games. Production quality in this looks fantastic. Love this map. The counters look great. The player aid cards look really packed full of all the information you're going to need to hopefully not really rely on a rule book. Looking at the rules, like I said, it's 55-page rule book, but when you cut out all the supporting stuff, it's about 30-ish pages of rules. And while there is a lot of dense rules in there, there are also a lot of graphics, so that probably cuts down even a little bit more, and a lot of that can be referenced off the player aid cards. That's what the assumption is, at least. Solitaire-wise, it's going to be a lot to play, but going to be quite a bit of fun. I love anything modern or near-future wars, whether it's hypothetical or real. That is totally my jam, so I'm real excited to play this game. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.